Thank you for inviting me today, and I'm happy to join you. My name is Carol Ewing Garber. I'm a professor of movement science at Teachers College at Columbia University in New York City, although I'm talking to you right now from my COVID home in Rhode Island. So, but you can pretend I'm in New York City. You know, my research area, I'm a clinical exercise physiologist by training. So I trained to work clinically with people with chronic disease. So my interest as a clinician is working with people who are either at high risk of various chronic diseases like heart disease and you know, diabetes and overweight and neuromuscular diseases. And my research interest is in the same area. So I do research that ranges from laboratory research in the exercise physiology lab to epidemiologic work. So doing work in population and large databases, but it's all centered around learning more about how to help people prevent disease, and for those who have diseases, how they can be healthier by engaging in more exercise. Well, I think I'll come back to that in a moment. You know, I got interested in exercise physiology as a field from my just interest in being really active as I was growing up. And although I didn't have as many opportunities to participate in organized sports as I would have liked to, but it's something I've always been very active, and I was always interested in, you know, how the body works and physiology, and I was also very interested in health. And when I learned about the field of exercise physiology, I realized I found my great home where I could combine my interest in health and physiology in the same way. And I knew I did not want to work in a laboratory with animals or looking through a microscope all the time, even though I'm very interested in the results of those kinds of studies. I really want to work with people. So I really like doing work that both from a clinician, where I'm interacting with people and hopefully helping them to feel better and be healthier. But also the research I do is work that I think generally helps the people when they're participating, but it has the goal to be able to be applied to practice so that people, you know, can be healthier and happier. And let's see, what else would you like to know? So I've been a professor at first of all at Columbia. I've been there 13 years. And I work only with graduate students. So we have two programs in two levels of degree, so master's and doctoral degree in what our program is called Applied Exercise Physiology. So one of the things I'll spend some time talking to you, and I can answer lots of questions about thinking about graduate school. Also I spent some time, I was at Northeastern University for about 7 years, and there I directed a graduate program in clinical exercise physiology. So it was a very practice-oriented program. And then before that, I was at Brown University in the medical school faculty, where my main workplace was one of the academic medical centers, and there I split my time between doing clinical work working with cardiac rehab and diabetes education and obesity management, heart disease prevention, pulmonary medicine. And then the other half was research. So I directed a clinical cardiology research and did work around exercise as a tool to uncover abnormal heart function, so different types of exercise tests. And I worked along with a nuclear cardiologist where we learned about different imaging techniques so that you could see how the heart was functioning during exercise or following exercise, as well as some studies where we promoted exercise in the community to try to change the heart disease risk profile of a whole community.
So my question, I'm the first one to ask a question, Dr. Garber.
Okay.
I'm curious about your education path. Like, where did you go to school? What did you go, where did you go for your master's and your PhD? And I'm really curious.
Well, that's a good question. So I'll tell you about that. So I did my undergraduate work in at the University of Connecticut. I grew up about 20 minutes away from UConn. And honestly, it was not my first choice of colleges because I wanted to go farther away from home, but my parents really wanted me to go to UConn. Well, you know, I was 17 and it's hard to not do what your parents want. So that's where I went. And I started out as a biology major, and being at a large state school, I learned quickly how much I hated those giant science classes, you know, the chemistry class with 800 students and, you know, a TA who just seemed never to be able to explain anything. And so I honestly decided, I hate this science. So I ended up changing my major to education, actually. So I got my degree in education, which was centered around sort of like after school kinds of programs, not to be a certified teacher. So I did work like after school and at the YMCA. And at the time I was working a lot. I had lots of summer jobs at summer camp. So I loved camp. So then after graduation, I went to work for the YMCA. And I was one of the first women actually they hired at the Y as a full-time program director. And I developed a lot of programs. Guess what my job was? Women and girls director. So my job was, you know, developing programs for women, girls, and also I had responsibility for all preschool kids, whether irrespective of whether they were boys or girls. And I really, really loved that. But around that time, again, my interest in health became very acute, and I started thinking about, well, what can I do? I love this, but I'd really like to do something more. And I thought about different healthcare careers and including medical school, but for some reason, I have to say I didn't have good mentoring. So I thought, you know, I was too old to think about going to medical school because I was, you know, after all, I'd been out of school for a couple of years, and you know, I was going to have to go back and take a few of those science courses I didn't take before I switched my major. So I kind of checked that off, that I was not going to do that. And then that was when I learned about exercise physiology. So I looked for schools at the time. I was actually living in Rhode Island, and I found the the two best programs that were available that I could commute to were back at UConn or Boston University. And I'd say UConn was much cheaper. So I ended up going back there for my master's, and I got my master's in exercise physiology there. And I thought that was going to be the end of my career, that I was going to go back and work at the Y and do more fitness with the Y. And we had to do a internship, and I got an opportunity to do an internship at one of the Brown medical school hospitals, teaching hospitals, in a research lab, and I absolutely loved it. You know, I worked with someone who was just amazing, and you know, I got to actually be in the lab and touch things, because at the time UConn didn't really have much in the way of a lab. And you know, I got to also, you know, do work some with the cardiac rehab and the exercise testing, the clinical stress testing area. So I really like that. So I thought, oh, maybe I should get a doctorate, because I just wanted to keep studying. So I actually applied, and at that time I was not able, I have family, so I wasn't really able to travel very far. So I found myself still with the same two choices of universities, and again, it still made more sense for me to continue to go to UConn. So so I did, and that's how I got my doctorate at UConn. And during the time I was at school, I was I was fortunate to get a part-time job, and then later a full-time job at the hospital where I did my internship during my master's. And that's where after I graduated with my doctorate, I stayed there for a long time. So a very, I would say, very circuitous route for my education, and not well thought out, because I just didn't know, you know, I didn't know much about school. My parents didn't know much about, you know, college. They never went to college. I was a first generation college student. And so I, you know, in some ways I lucked out, because I managed in my career, you know, just happened to meet the right people. And, you know, I was just fortunate. I kind of just fell into some of these positions, although, you know, I certainly demonstrate some, you know, ability, or they wouldn't have kept me. But you know, I wasn't as thoughtful as I would recommend most people be in thinking through their, you know, educational choices, and also you know, thinking about their career choices. So that's how I got there.
Then how did you transfer to Colombia?
Well, you know, again, I think, you know, I liked teaching. So when I first finished with my doctorate, I was working full-time at Brown, again, mostly clinical work, research. And then I also worked with Brown students during their senior year, the biomed students, undergraduate students during their last year had to do some kind of thesis. And so I would mentor those students during that senior year, because they'd come and work in my lab. And I just loved that. I loved the teaching. So I always knew that I wanted to do more teaching. And I also pretty regularly was asked to teach as an adjunct at the University of Rhode Island. That was not far from where I was living. So, so that's sort of how I started with teaching. And then, you know, I finally did go to Northeastern as a full-time professor. But we didn't have a doctoral program at Northeastern. And one day I just happened to see the job in New York, and it's like, wow, that's just what I want. I really want to work with doctoral students, because it really helps you do your better research, I think,
Yeah.
and you have more opportunity to develop, to have a close relationship with your students. So I applied, and by chance I got the job. Apparently, my application came in about the day before the search committee was going to submit their choice of candidates.
Wow.
And my application came in just in time, and they saw it and they went, wow, we should interview this person before we decide. And then they decide to offer me the job. So that's how that job happened.
Awesome, Dr. Garber. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So can you talk about some of the how the clinical comes together with the application, the real life public health perspective in your lab? What do you do? What kind of initiatives do you take? And what kind of a lab do you have? You built that lab, right?
Okay. Right. Well, yeah, thanks. Thanks for that question. So, I think that, with the work that I do is, usually we're asking some kind of question, but most of the work we do is centered around, how can you make like exercise program more acceptable to people who may not like to exercise, who may not have much experience, and can you take that exercise program and sort of make sure it fits within that person's lifestyle and their culture and community. I work at Colombia. I work mainly in lower resource neighborhoods, so people who don't have a lot, ability to just go to a gym, for example. Even though there are some public, pretty good public facilities, but they're often not really accessible to people unless they live in certain places. And most recently been working a lot with families of very young children, so toddlers, like 2- and 3-year-olds, through an early Head Start program. And so our challenge has been, we do offer some of the program in the school, but the kids and the parent come to school only once a week. So we, developed a program that's very creative, and kids and parents can participate at the same time. So you can imagine a 2-year-old and mostly a mom, but some dads come, participating in the movement program. And it wasn't a big enough dose of exercise to really have, an impact on their health. So we also added some home component, like kind of a homework component that a program we call it Skip, Small Kids and Physical Activity. And we, the home portion, we develop these, they call them activity cards, but they're basically homework. So each day they come to the program. We work mostly on different fundamental movement skills, so like skipping and running and crawling, because they're 2-year-olds. So we do, a lot of that kind of motion, basic motor skills. And so then they get Skip at Home card, which provides them, first of all, with different common household items they can use to make for affordances. So we, have them make balls out of, aluminum foil and newspaper, and using, toilet paper rolls and things like that for them. And we also do give them a few small toys, like tiny balls, and not too tiny because they're 2-year-olds.
Yeah.
And big enough so they are not dangerous. And we give them like a little scarf, or they use towels. So we give them, a list of things that they can make. So we have like a little craft piece, and then we give them a few examples of how they can, practice the activity. So, if we're doing jumping, of course, we have to have them pretend they're a frog or,
Wow.
a different animal. So it gives them just some, small ideas, ideas that to encourage the families or the kids, mostly, to move around, for short bouts during the day. And then, we kind of ask them, like, what else could you do? Like, how else could you move? But we had to figure it out, so because people live in very small spaces. They're in New York City and small apartments, and many of the families we work with have multiple families, or at least extended families who live together, and they work on all different, so there'll always be somebody who's sleeping and somebody who's, so we had to come up with very, it's challenging how to help kids be active at home in tiny spaces.
Of course.
So we worked on that with the families as well. We had different ideas, and we'd ask them, and it's worked pretty nicely. That we've seen that both the kids and the parents become more active. I think the parents have been really surprised. They didn't know about activity, and they've also been having fun, because they don't get to have too much fun, because they're always, working and worrying about, whether they can pay for their rent and buy food and things like that. So this has provided an opportunity for them to actually have fun with their kids. And they can also, include older kids in this activity. And we've also been working on introducing them to some neighborhood resources. So where the school is, we actually have, take them out sometimes, and we're not doing any of that right now with COVID, but, we would go to the local playground in the park, which they may not have gone to before, and really introduce them to the park, because fortunately some of the parks in the neighborhoods where we're working currently are, pretty safe, and they're well equipped. So it's a matter of, introducing the families to the playground, and so they learn about it and learn that, oh, it's not too hard to get there, and I don't really have to be concerned about going there. They learn that it's actually safe. So that's also been something that's really helpful. So that's kind of a big project we're working on. My lab itself is, it's New York City, so we have, sort of a small space, but we have a pretty nice actual lab. We actually have 2 metabolic carts and 2, stress test systems. We have, we have a really nice FACA bioelectrical impedance body composition device. We do a lot of, cardiopulmonary exercise tests.
Sure.
And then we also do lots of field measurements, like accelerometers. We do a lot of accelerometer work in our lab. So, it's a pretty good lab. So,
and the master
doing almost everything.
And the master students are allowed to collect their data, their thesis, or
yeah.
Yes?
Oh yeah. So one of the great things about our program at the master's level is we actually have 2 semesters of required labs as part of our program, and the labs work that one day of the lab, when they have a lecture and learn about the different tests and why you would pick them and how to interpret them. So it's more of a full class, and then they come to the lab another day of the week, and they get an hour and a half in the lab with instruction, hands-on. It's all hands-on in groups of 10 or under. So they get, everyone in our program gets the opportunity to actually, play with the metabolic card and, touch all the equipment, and students do have an option to do research as a part of the thesis, or they can also do a exam in at least one of our master's programs. But those, if they want to do research, they can come in the lab and use the lab and collect data. But they also can come and work with me, or we have a number of doctoral students who are also doing a whole host of different studies. So, they can work alongside a doc student as well.
That's pretty awesome. I have one more question, then I'll let my students, I mean, you can always, stop me and, ask your questions. But I was going to ask, what are the emphasis areas do you have in your graduate program now that my students are going to graduate from the undergraduate program that we offer? Let's say they want to move to the East Coast and apply to the Teachers College to get their master's degree. So is it only in applied exercise physiology, or do you have other emphases?
Right. So our program has the applied exercise physiology is part of an overall program, movement science and education and kinesiology, and we have really 3 concentrations. So applied exercise physiology, which is, it's really a broad definition of, it's more like the practice of exercise physiology. So it has, it has a strong physiology base, but, we also talk about behavior and other, important aspects of practice. And then we have a program in motor learning and control for the neural aspects of movement. And then we have a program which is nominally called physical education, which has a teacher prep piece, both if you want to become, a PE teacher initially, or you already are. But we have another track, which is sociocultural aspects of movement. So my colleague, who's the expert in leads that concentration, does work, understanding things like, race, gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and, all different ways that people identify and how those identities influence movement and activity. So it's more of a socio-cultural study. So that's in our main program. We also, at the master's level, have a combined program along with nutrition. So students can be in a nutrition and exercise physiology program. And those students, take, pretty much all the sort of core required courses in our master's program for applied physiology, along with the courses in nutrition, and they can become a registered dietitian if they choose to.
That is pretty good. And what are the requirements to get in the program?
Well, we're probably the least requiring graduate school ever. So the first good news is we don't require any standardized tests, so no GREs or anything like that. We don't find those helpful. But, we do look for good students. So, but that doesn't mean necessarily, we don't just look for straight A students. We look for, students who, have decent, above a 3.0 ideally, but occasionally we have taken someone with just a little below that. If they, because often people don't, may not do well maybe in their freshman or sophomore year, and then they find their passion for exercise or field, and then they do awesome. So we definitely encourage people who may have that kind of background to consider. But, we look very, probably the most important thing is their statement, like why you're interested in the field in general, like what makes you excited about exercise, and and also in that, where you're talking about, what you think you might want to do, how this degree might fit into your plan. And by that, I don't mean that we would expect to ever see you say, I'm going to get this degree and then I'm, going to immediately, go on to do research in X, Y, or Z. Because most master's students just really don't know exactly what they want to do. And that's okay. But, just thinking about, well, I might use this degree, I want to go out and, be an advanced practitioner in the health fitness realm. I might want to use this as a stepping stone for to go on to other health professions. So sometimes students will use it to go on, we do get some that go on to GPT programs or med school or, public health school. So that's perfectly fine. And others, they want to get a doctoral degree. And, so we just like to see that people have thought about like why that's important for them, rather than I'm just going to go get a master's because I don't know what else to do. And of course, it's, every school likes to see why that person wants to come to our school. So that's always good to make sure you, put something like that. But, that's a really big piece. The recommendations do matter. They're always, sometimes, if a lot of times for people in undergrad programs, especially if you're from a larger program, your faculty might not know you very well. So sometimes those recommendations don't, they don't make a big difference positively for your admission, unless that, the person is writing about you, just knows you really well and, are glowing. But it is important, just to, because we just like to see, that you have, like we'd rather have someone come who's interested in the field, who, is going to work hard and take advantage of the opportunity that is presented by, getting to study and learn more about exercise. So those are the, kind of the main things. And our program, we do try to spend a lot of time with students who are thinking about, their next step after their master's, of, helping to prepare, like if you want to go into doctoral studies, what are the things that you'll need to do? Or if you're thinking, I've just written several recommendations for people applying for DPT programs. So really, getting to know people and helping them figure out what they do need to do in order to, have a chance to do, whatever it is they think they'd like to do next. So that's important. But we do have a number who stay with us in the doctoral program, and some of whom never thought they would go on for a doctorate at all. So that's kind of nice.
It's because of you, I believe.
Yes. Well, not everyone stays with me. Some of them do go elsewhere, but I'd say, pretty much everyone who's wanted to go on for doctoral work has been able to do that, to go somewhere. So,
good.
I think that's something that's good.
Yeah, definitely.
But like I said, we definitely, although people might think, oh, it's Columbia, it's an Ivy League school, you only take people with, like perfect GRE scores and, like 4.0 grade point averages, and that's not the case. We really look at the whole person, and I'd say, your character that comes across in your application is the most important piece.
Oh, that sounds awesome. So I'm going to turn to my students to see if they have any questions about the Teachers College, Colombia, graduate programs before we switch to ACSM maybe.
Okay, I was going to say I wanted to talk about ACSM also. So I'd love to hear some questions there.
Yeah, don't be shy.
I can give free advice. Okay.
I have a question. So I've taken a child development course, and so I kind of like know the basics of the early Head Start like program. But in your opinion, or like your background, why is that needed or helpful for the toddlers?
Well, I think, early Head Start in general, provides some strong, education for early, kids very early in age. And in fact, the, Head Start program, which is really cool, has programs starting during pregnancy. So one of the things that is really special, which is beyond, just what people might get just by going to school that might be available in the neighborhoods, that they also provide a lot of social support for the families, since many it's for lower income families. So a lot of families do need connection to social services, and also there are opportunities for they do spend time with nutrition support, so that the kids get good more nutritious diets, which is so important in those early years. And it's the nice thing is that really it could support a family from very early and up till well, really pre-K or K, depending on where you live. So but that those early years are so essential in developing both their general development, their brain development, but also their physical development, which are and speech, which are so important to be ready to start to learn when the kids do start school. So I'm a big fan of Head Start. I just think it's pretty amazing what's offered for families. And even, though many families who take advantage of that service, often they're, because they're housing insecure, they've got to move a lot, and they may end up in a different program. But that's the other beauty about Head Start, is that there, many of the programs, schools available. So often families, even though they move, they may still be able to take advantage. So that's important. I mean, one downside is Head Start really hasn't emphasized physical activity, in the way that at least those of us who really believe the research that supports the importance of physical activity for health, and also the fact that, the kids' activity behaviors are established very early, and that tracks through their adult life. And we're finding, even in our Head Start, I mean, it's a major metropolitan area, so it may be different in different locations. But even in our group, when we start, we measure their activity accelerometers. The kids and their parents are very sedentary. They're not getting much activity. So it's actually led us, we're about to start some work looking at activity in 1-year-olds, because we're really interested in seeing, how early this pattern gets established, and then, hopefully then can try to change that. But I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, Professor, I have a question as well. My name is Oliver Crosby, and I'm going to go the other direction in more geriatrics. And so that is my emphasis and my form of interest, because I work in a rehab center for Sutter Health Hospital System here in California. And what I'm finding during this COVID-19, many of our seniors are not getting the proper movement that they do need. And being, from a rehab background, I have a physical therapy assistance degree. I've noticed that the aquatic program was the biggest benefit for our seniors. So just in your expertise, comments, because I know you've been talking about like more about your low income, and I'm going to focus more on low income seniors and how we get the information to them, because many of our seniors are not computer savvy. They're not smartphone savvy. They don't text. And so I'm trying to really wrap my mind around how am I going to get this information out to them that they stay movement during this quarantine time. Because life as we know it is now going to change because of COVID-19. And our seniors are not being, they're kind of being pushed aside,
Right. Well, I did a lot of work in my career with old people too. I actually think older people and kids are a lot alike, because, like to have fun, and the only difference is kids move faster than older people. But, I couldn't agree more. I mean, in general, older adults do not have sufficient services for that, to promote their activity, especially those who may, be in rehabs or nursing homes or assisted living, those kinds of institutional places. And, even the seniors who live in, communities, are often, in smaller spaces, and often become frightened to go out, especially those who may live in, neighborhoods that, may be less safe, or at least they perceive of them as less safe. So, I think that the challenge is, trying to reach them, and that's not always easy. As you mentioned, a lot of them don't have connectivity, and if they do, at least I know from my 95-year-old mother-in-law, it's a challenge. She can email, but it's hard for us to teach her things when she has trouble, especially now with COVID. But I think we have to use the best means. So it may be for the older folks that you can reach, that maybe it is sending them a letter or something, in the snail mail. About activity, and a lot of times older people may not realize the importance of activity, because they may have grown up at a time when that was not really encouraged, especially current seniors. They would have grown up at a time, especially for women, like being active would have been considered not appropriate for a grown woman to participate in sports at all, or exercise. So, we do need to overcome some of that, those attitudes, or that, I'm too old, like, why would I start now? So I think, we can think about ways that we might reach them with, sort of print work, and also maybe approach it from, maybe less than like, let's do exercise, which many people have this mind of, doing these like burpees and things that they might have done while they're growing up, or, playing a sport, and they just don't imagine themselves doing that kind of activity. So, maybe thinking more about, things like dancing, or, creative movement, or, even the idea of, sort of walking and finding partners to walk around, even within a building. So, it's not easy, but, we know that it makes a huge difference. And especially if those older people are able to, are still able to live on their own, it's like the most important time for us to really kind of do the full court press, so to speak, to help those seniors continue to be active, and become more active, so that they can maintain their independence. It's hard, but I think the personal touch can really help. And people mostly in their mail get either bills, which they're not happy to see, or junk mail. So maybe a nice mail piece might really capture their attention.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. I'm glad that you're working with older folks. That's really a great group to work with, and they definitely need more of us working with them.
Yeah, the population is growing exponentially. Yeah. So, we need these resources put in place for them, because Our baby boomers, my parents, you know, they still active, still independent, still walking around, still driving. And I work with patients that had driven in their 90s, you know, they still have the activities of their limbs, you know.
Right. No, it makes a big difference in it, you know, and it's also, you know, it's still not too late. So if someone's never done this before, but, you know, we really have done a pretty bad job of supporting people's activities, you know, even those who are in, you know, pretty nice places, you know, that people who have more resources and, you know, even in those settings, rarely do they have sufficient, you know, physical activity and exercise facilities. And then, you know, they don't have qualified, well-trained people who actually lead the exercise. And then when you have people who have physical limitations or mental, you know, cognitive limitations, the need's even greater, but the services tend to be even less because they tend to be more, you know, problem-based, like, oh, you get PT for a certain period because you fell, but after a certain period the PT's over, and then mostly they're just sitting in a chair and then until they fall again. So it's a problem.
Any other questions?
I have a question. So this is my classmate was just talking about. I also want to pursue geriatrics, but you know, first things first, I need to get into grad school. So what are some things that you recommend? Because I'm planning personally to take a gap year. I just want to retake like physio, anatomy, not because I don't remember anything, but just because I feel like I need to know that through and through. And so there's just, I was just looking at some, you know, what the requirements are and some like highly recommended electives and just trying to do that before I get to grad school. And I just want to know, you know, in your expertise opinion, is that a good idea, or what do you have to add to that?
Well, I personally, I'm a big fan of taking some time between undergrad and grad, you know, to just give you some time to really think about, you know, what you want to do, so that you might be able to pick programs, graduate programs that meet your needs better, because you can see that there's a, you know, a wide array of programs, and some are, you know, most of them have some kind of orientation, or at least the faculty has some expertise that, you know, really does shape the kind of character of the program. So I think taking that time is good. You know, there's nothing wrong with, you know, beefing up your background and knowledge. I think it makes the adjustment to graduate school much easier, you know, that you know, had the time to, you know, and a lot of the material still fresh in your head. I don't think it's necessarily absolutely necessary, but I think, you know, I know when students come to our we actually don't have any specific course requirements, believe it or not. You can come to our program if you're an art major without any science, which seems shocking, but you know, what I find is that, you know, students who take the extra time to learn, whether it's on their own or taking, you know, another course to prepare, tend to do much better than the students who just assume, well, I studied that before, I already know it. Because every time you study, you know, physiology or, you know, probably most subjects, you learn something new. I mean, I teach physiology every year. I teach exercise physiology, teaching it right now. And every time I teach it, I learn something new. And you'd think by now I would know it all, but I don't. Because there's more to learn. There's another nuance. And that's what's so fun about physiology, is that there's a lot to think about, a lot going on in that body.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Questions?
Anyone else? Any questions? Anything that you're curious about?
I have a question, another question in regards to, like, you know, the graduate program that you are part of, do they have more of an online type of based program where people that want to stay in the state would be interested in taking, you know, going further in their education?
Sure. Well, why wouldn't you want to come to New York? Come on. No. Well, you know, I think we're right now we're all online. So my students currently are living anywhere from Seoul, South Korea to I think we have some in the Bay Area. I can't remember where everyone is. I know a few people from California, but you know, I'm not quite sure. You know, I'm not sure we're going to have 100% online program, but I will say over the last few years, we have increasingly offered online options, even with when we have been offering the courses in person. So I'd say right now, the answer is no, we don't have that, but I think we're moving in that direction. So there would, you know, be those opportunities, and you know, there may still be, especially, you know, with some of the hands-on training where, you know, we've been thinking about whether, you know, we could have a program where you might come for like a concentrated, like 2 weeks, and then, you know, spend all your time and get all your hands-on lab work that way. But at the moment, it's not 100% online for sure, I guess, going into the future. But
would that be applicable to your doctorate program, Dr. Garber? I would be interested in finishing my doctorate degree.
Right. Well, you know, it's kind of the same situation, you know, with the doctoral program, since, you know, people come to the doctoral program, obviously, with lots of graduate credits from, you know, if our program does require masters, and, you know, and if you have, you know, even more coursework, then it would work out. You know, at the moment, you know, there are a number of courses that are online, like a lot of the STAT courses that people would be taking at grad, you know, at that level are, you know, some of the courses within our, you know, movement sciences are regularly online, and you know, we have a regular seminar that all students attend. That one, that's always something that could be attended, you know, remotely. But, you know, at the moment, it's not fully online, but it depends on, you know, kind of what courses someone would need to take, you know, whether it would be possible to do it fully online. It's definitely possible to do the research, you know, somewhere else. You know, our main requirement for the research is that you're working closely with your advisor. So we really do have this strong mentoring. So, you know, we're not a program where you just go off and do your research and then come back and show your, you know, faculty member, like, this is what I've done. You know, we like to make sure that we're really part of it, because we view that as being a, you know, important teaching experience.
Sure.
You know, that you deserve that. That's why you're paying to come to school, is to get that mentoring and training. So it's definitely something we could talk about. Maybe it could work out.
Maybe I can collect my data over the summer and move to the New York City. you know?
Well, you know, it just, you know, I think it's just a matter, it's probably more about, you know, getting the coursework, because, I mean, since we all can see with Zoom, you know, we're able to do a lot. I mean, right now, I have one of my doctoral students is currently living in Iran, because she went home due to a family emergency, and although she is, you know, she isn't a U.S. citizen, so she should be able to come back, but she can't come back because of COVID and travel restrictions. So we have managed to figure out a nice research project she can do in Iran. So she's, you know, she's still continuing, and she's still able to join, you know, in all our virtual, you know, our doctoral seminar, and you know, be part of our lab, even though she's Zooming in. So, you know, often if there's a will, there's a way, I guess. That's the best I can say.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Other questions?
Can I actually ask one more question? It's on this topic. So, I mean, while it's great to try to figure out how we can convert these things to online, I'm actually completely the opposite. I'm hoping that I'm looking forward mostly to going to grad school to get that hands-on experience, you know, and it wasn't until like last semester, quite honestly, is what it felt like, that I finally started getting that, and then COVID happened. So I'm nervous that I won't be as prepared or feel prepared that I need to be to go into the real world when it's like things are just online.
Right. No, I think, you know, you're right. It's hard to replace the laboratory experience, and that, you know, has been kind of the biggest challenge, you know, and my biggest disappointment actually, you know, with our program, since we do have this, you know, really intensive opportunity to have hands-on experience in the lab and develop expertise. And now we're trying to do this remotely. And I mean, I'm not teaching it, so that class, but you know, I'm not as confident that the students are going to get all the hands-on. They're going to know how to do the tests, but you know, you're right about that part. I think that we're hoping that, you know, as soon as we are able to have some physical presence in the lab, that, you know, we'll be able to offer some extra opportunities for students. But I think, you know, in terms of, I would hope by next year, you know, that we'll be back to, you know, at least able to offer sufficient hands-on experience for people, because I do agree that's important. I think, you know, with the learning, I think if it depends, you know, on how much time the faculty have and what resources they have to make their online classes. So, you know, I think some things go better online than sometimes they do in class. And of course it varies from different people, but I think, you know, in terms of the content, I think often a lot of what you have to study in graduate school can be done pretty well. But it's that personal connection and, you know, meeting your classmates and, you know, maybe having the experience, because I think, you know, my best friend, you know, that were my friends in graduate school are still like my best buds, you know, because we, you know, it was a tense experience to go through graduate school, and you know, we still have that connection, even if we haven't seen each other for a long time. Like, we'll see each other at a conference and we'll all like revert to like, remember all these, you know, silly things that we did when we worked in the lab, or we'll start laughing about some of our eccentric teachers and things like that. And so, you know, those are important parts of the experience. But I'm, you know, at least reasonably optimistic that, you know, most of us will have more on, you know, in-person opportunities for that work, if for those who really would like it. I think it's clear with the COVID and, you know, the challenges that, you know, for some people it still, you know, provides a good opportunity to be able to, you know, study from afar and, you know, have the opportunity to, you know, go somewhere where you wouldn't have otherwise had a chance to go.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Dr. Garber. So do you want to talk about some of the ACSM opportunities, certifications? We just covered that material last week. They discussed about the publications and how to keep up to date after graduation through some institutions like the ACSM. So I would love you to show us the way, if you will.
Sure. So, you know, I've been, you know, well, you know, I'm quite biased since I'm a past president of ACSM. So, you know, that's been my professional home. But I joined ACSM during my master's program at the encouragement of our advisor, and I went to my first meeting was regional chapter meeting on the ACSM, the New England Regional Chapter, and that was like so amazing. I was just in awe of just so much you could learn, and it's like you learn more in 2 days than sometimes you felt like you learned in a whole semester. And also the fact that you could actually meet people, like although I was kind of shy, so I wasn't one of those students who runs up to some famous person and immediately introduced myself, but I still did get to meet people. My advisor was very nice about bringing us along and introducing us to different people, but I did meet people on my own, and I did become involved, which I think made a really big difference in my even thinking about going on for further graduate school, because I started with my master's and I wasn't sure I was going to go on for a doctorate, and the fact that you then develop all these colleagues all over, but people that you actually got to know because you hung around with them during the conference, and you can call them up and ask questions and get their advice, and that really made a big difference for me. I think I always felt like it was important for us to give back to our professions. And then, my first national meeting was like, oh my gosh, I had a presentation at the conference, and of course I was terrified, and I was especially it was a slide presentation of my research and my master's research, and I was just terrified of what questions would come. And I did my talk, and I'm standing there, and this person walks up to the mic and goes, "Bob Bruce, Seattle." Now, the Bruce protocol? It was that Bob Bruce.
Oh.
Dr. Bruce, the first question I get, and I'm standing there, and I thought, oh my gosh, I'm gonna faint. Bob Bruce, this question is gonna be a killer. I was like, I could hardly speak. And he asked some really simple question, and turns out he was very nice and kind. But that's the kind of experience you can have, and you can walk around. And I remember my first meeting, and I'd be like, well, I call them my textbook, so I would see the different authors of my textbooks, and I'm like, oh, there's this person and that person, and that was pretty thrilling, although mostly I was still afraid to walk up and talk to them for a while. But then, I got more involved. So, I got to move up. I volunteered for different committees, and that's how I got to have opportunities to, be author of, 2 position stands for ACSM. And, I've been an author actually for the last 3 editions of the guidelines. So, you don't exercise prescription chapter, if you don't like it, you can blame me. And my colleague Mike the same, although the editors do kind of change some of what you write, but I would never have gotten those opportunities to do that, or to work with some of these people who I'm honestly still in awe of, because they're really amazing researchers, and very very accomplished. So I just I'm always encouraging people to get involved, but I think it's also it's a place where you can network, and potentially find your next job or your next your grad school place, because you'll actually meet people who you might talk to, who might go, wow, you'd be a great student. We'd love to have you in our program. And that happens, for students who come to me, and also students that I've introduced to others. I also think, you know, as a student, it gives you a chance to meet other students, not only the students you go to school with, who often you don't get to hang out with at all. You know, you're in class, but you don't, you know, just get to sit around and have a cup of coffee or get a beer with them or whatever, you know, if you're able to go to have a beer, which you will, right? You can when you're a grad student, definitely, if you like. Or maybe a few years, I guess. But, you know, it's like hanging out with people and, you know, just getting a chance to get to know your classmates and others. It just, you know, it just opens your world because you learn about, you know, the way different schools work, different jobs that people have, and you know, particularly with ACSM, if you ever get to go to national meeting, you know, you're getting to talk to people from all over the world. So, you know, you get to talk to researchers from, you know, Japan or somebody, you know, from Brazil, and it's really, really great in terms of, you know, thinking about things in different ways, because we, you know, definitely think about our science differently depending on, you know, the culture you're surrounded in and the place, you know, where you were trained. So I'm a big fan of professional organizations. There's certainly others that are good too, but I encourage all of you to try to, you know, be a member of a professional organization. And especially while you're a student, because they're much cheaper at that point. But it's still, I think, a good investment. And then, you know, I know you've talked about certifications, and, you know, people are always going, is it worth getting a certification? And, you know, in the health fitness world, you know, you can't really work in any, you know, fitness facility without having some certifications, although, you know, many of them don't require what are the professional certifications that require degrees. But, you know, they still make a difference in that it shows that you have, you know, greater qualifications. I think you know, eventually our field is moving slowly. It's been working a long time to make it a profession. And, you know, it's moving more and more towards the where you will have to have, you know, a professional certification. And certainly many clinical jobs, for example, will expect that you have those certifications. I think personally, you know, I have several that ACSM discontinued after I worked so hard for them, but I still have them, but they just, no one knows about them. But I took, I think, 4 different certifications with ACSM. And even though I don't know that any of them made a difference in my job, they did make a difference for me personally. You know, having to study for them, it helped me really solidify my knowledge. And then, you know, the fact that I passed gave me a lot of confidence in myself and my knowledge. And I think, you know, it does distinguish you. You know, I think, you know, when you see lots of resumes, they do make a difference. So I think I still really encourage people to get them. And I think, you know, the other is altruistic, because it helps our profession. You know, the more people who have a professional credential, the more people we can say, hey, we are a profession. I worked, when I was in Massachusetts, we worked along with the Mass Association of Clinical Exercise Physiologists to try to get licensure for exercise physiologists in Massachusetts. And, you know, we spent lots of time at the State House. We were talking to all the different legislators about the importance of, you know, what we do as the exercise physiologists and where we fit in the healthcare setting. And I think, you know, we did a very good job of introducing many people to our profession. But the next question they'd always ask is, how many of you are there in Massachusetts? And, you know, we knew about clinical exercise physiologists, and, you know, we kind of stretched it like maybe there are, you know, 200 in the whole state. But it was hard to even count because not everyone has a credential, that a certification. And then, you know, in terms of if we had gone to try to license all the exercise physiologists, it would be even harder because we were up against, you know, the Physical Therapy Association, who like, you aren't professionals, we're the professionals who work in movement. And we're like, no, we have, you know, bachelor's and doctoral degrees, and we do much different things than you do as physical therapists. But the hardest part was that we didn't have the numbers that we could point to say, hey, there are like hundreds of us out there, you know, to really say that we are established. So I would just say that, you know, that's also something that it just helps us to add to our credibility as a profession.
Yeah.
Because, you know, you work hard, you study, you have, you know, you've gotten a good basis, and, you know, you get the credential, you know, you're able to practice, you're able to do a lot of really excellent work, and the world needs, there's so many people that need us to be healthy and to be able to move around and, you know, do what they like and what they don't like too, their household tasks and things. But if, you know, we've just got to, you know, get out there. We do have to promote ourselves a lot.
Yes.
And that helps.
Oh, yeah.
And that helps.
Yes. Well, I am a member of the ACSM, and have been for a while, and I'm currently preparing for the exam by December in the group exercise instructor certification. So, and it was just very interesting. Again, through COVID, it's been a little challenging now to take that state test. So I don't know if you've heard anything about like your state certifications on how they're going to change or how they're going to become more computer oriented and things of that nature.
Well, I think, you know, ACSM has moved to finally, after, you know, we've been asking them for just a while to be able to take, you know, the exams at home, or, you know, even a lot of schools have been asking to be able to administer the certification exams at their school. And that's been a problem because ACSM has always wanted people to go to testing centers. So I think this has really changed. You know, some of the thinking, I think it will persist after this once they, you know, now see that it actually can work. So I'm hoping it'll be more accessible to people. And, you know, for some of the certificate, you know, they are waiving, at least currently, like normally you have to have a CPR, current CPR card to take the exam. So they're waiving that at least for a while. So that's also, you know, takes another barrier. But yeah, I think, you know, making it more convenient is good, and having the time to study for it is good too.
Yes. So they are working on trying to get that more accessible on a home-based computer. Okay.
Yeah, no, they're definitely doing that. You know, they have the certified exercise physiologist is available currently on the home computer. So, you know, I think anyone who has you know, a degree, a bachelor's degree, or is, you know, close to having a bachelor's degree can take that exam. So you might want to think about raising.
Yeah, they had changed that. I was looking into that at one time, and I guess it lapsed and then it switched where you did have to have that degree. At first, it wasn't like that.
Well, yeah, it depends too. You know, they've been changing a lot of the approach because they are moving towards a model of only those who graduate from accredited programs can get that certification, the certified exercise physiologist. They haven't done it yet, but that's where they're moving. And actually the National Strength and Conditioning Association is doing the same thing with the CSCS, the Certified Strength and Conditioning Specialist. But that's going to be by, I think it's 2030, they're going to require everyone who takes that certification to have graduated from a program that's accredited for that credential. So a lot of us who are working in the academic side who haven't gotten our programs accredited now are, you know, having to think more about maybe we should do that. Because I think, you know, there's been a lot of
I think so too.
you know, in terms of, you know, schools that have done, you know, have strong programs, often they not really felt that it was necessary for them to, you know, be accredited, because it's a lot of extra work for everyone, and it didn't, you know, make a difference really in terms of what students could do, or, you know, what students came to the program. But, you know, it is going to in the future. But anyway, you'll be close, so you might want to, you know, consider that. Don't be afraid to, you know, reach and aspire.
Right,
You know, your academics should have, I think, will have prepared you pretty well for the exam already. And, you know, and it's a matter of really just, you know, studying and knowing how to focus just to study for the exam. But it's also good to start, you know, with some of the, you know, like the group exercises, the personal trainer, you know, just to get your feet wet and see what it's like to take those exams, because it is intimidating.
Yes.
Especially if you don't like, you know, if you're not good at like multiple choice tests and stuff like that, that can really make it hard, because you jinx yourself if you, you know, come in and say, I'm just not good at these tests. So then you get so nervous that it's really hard to take the test and do well.
Okay, will do. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I believe ACSM is required for some of the corporate jobs at this time, like Apple. If you want to get into their health team to work on the technologies, or Nike, they require ACSM certification, and they don't take any other. They don't take NASM or NSCA. They really want you to be certified through the clinical exercise physiology. And I heard, I didn't even attempt taking that, but I heard that's the hardest one, because it sets the standard for the entire world, the guidelines, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, that's an example of, you know, when employers know about the credentials, you know, often these do become requirements for the jobs. And, you know, often that is because somebody works in those places who, you know, knows about the certifications and what they mean, and, you know, may have them themselves. So, but, you know, you'll find that it varies, you know, across different places in the country and different employers. But, you know, the thing about the, you know, ACSM is a more general overview of exercise. And, you know, so you are, you know, it tests on the knowledge across all of your, you know, competencies and knowledge bases, you know, both at the certified exercise physiologist and then the, you know, clinical exercise physiologist. Then you have to add, you know, more knowledge about, you know, people with different chronic diseases, and, you know how to do some ECG reading and things like that. But, you know, those are things that you can, you know, aspire to. And sometimes you can even, you know, start working in a clinical setting without that. And then you learn a lot on your job, and then you would be eligible to take that kind of a certification. Or you could, you know, study in a program that prepares you, you know, with the academic part of the knowledge, and then, you know, you need to get some practical experience. But those are all things to, you know, consider in your future. You don't always have to start doing one thing and stay with that your whole life. You know, you can keep growing and expanding with your experiences.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much, Dr. Garber.
Oh, it's been my pleasure to be here.
Is there any questions from the students for her? We discussed this last week, and now we're hearing from firsthand the expert in ACSM. So this is great. Thank you so much.
Oh, well, I'm glad to be here. And, you know, I will say, you know, if someone does have a question later on, you can find me. So, you know, don't feel shy if you have a question that I can answer. But, you know, I hope that, you know, as you're thinking about what you're, you know, want to do in your future, you know, that there's a lot of opportunities, you know, at the graduate level. And I told you a lot about my program. So I'm not just here selling my program, but, you know, I think there's a lot of different decision points of, you know, what graduate school you'd like to go to, and, you know, what makes sense for you from a practical standpoint, you know, like, you know, whether you really, where you want to find yourself, like, are you like one of those people like only can live on a coast? Do you like a city? You want to be somewhere not in a city? You know, what, and of course that, you know, cost always comes into play. So, you know, thinking about, you know, what's affordable and what kinds of aid can come and things like that. You know, there's a lot of decisions, but a lot of great things you can do, you know, from educationally to a career. So
definitely. We appreciate you joining us. We're humbled by it. Thank you for your time that you spent for us, with us. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. And
yeah, if you don't have any questions, students, I don't hear any. So we can just end the meeting if you don't have anything else in your mind to say.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. This was very informational. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Garber, for your time. Appreciate it.
Oh,
Feel
thank
very
you.
privileged. Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate everything you had to tell us today.
Thank you.
They're a little shy to show their faces, but they were here listening. Thank you.
Well, that was okay. You know, you never know how it works with, you know, different places have a different culture around their Zoom. So no, I was happy that people were chatting, and I thought they were very, very good at not being shy. at least some of them. So that was great, and it was fun.
Doctor?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Dr. Garber, before I forget, I'm sorry, when I was trying to write down the notes, kind of lost part of it. What was your doctor's degree again?
In exercise physiology. So I studied at UConn before anybody knew about UConn, because it didn't have basketball then. But you know, I concentrated, I was interested in clinical exercise physiology. So the program didn't have a specific, you know, sort of track in clinical exercise physiology, but I was able to take some courses that were offered at the time, you know, in, like we had a class in electrocardiography, and then at the time, UConn had used to run a workshop for ACSM that was for clinical exercise physiology. So we took that as part of our coursework. But, you know, mostly I just took general exercise physiology. And then, you know, in my interest in research, I, you know, focused more, and that's how I got most of our knowledge about kind of the clinical side of exercise physiology.
And just wondering, if you did not take this path, what would you maybe end up studying instead? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah. Well, you know, live and learn. You know, I think I probably would have tried to go to medicine, as one possibility, you know, to go to med school, which I mentioned I didn't think that was, I thought I was too old to think about that, but I didn't even know about it. I think public health has always also really interested me. And when I was first going to graduate school, there were almost no programs where you could get a like an MPH without a doctoral degree beforehand, because it was intended for like physicians or, you know, PhDs and kind of a specialty training. And, you know, now there's lots of MPH programs. So I might have done that. That was definitely something that I was researching and considering. And then I don't know about some of the other health professions, you know, like I just didn't know. I didn't know. I don't think I would have liked physical therapy, to tell you the truth, but you know, I didn't even know about it. It would have been something I would have looked at, but maybe otherwise, you know, maybe not med school, maybe like a PA or NP or something like that, nurse practitioner. I don't know.
What do you think about I got one more question. What do you think about the public health arena? Because like rehab services and things of that nature are changing and it's becoming more corporate.
Mm-hmm.
It's less hands-on now. And I'm, you know, I'm not really enthused about doing it anymore in that, you know, that vein. I want to be more effective in, you know, prevention and teaching and, you know,
well,
using my skill set, you know.
Right. Well, I mean, I think public health is a great arena. And, you know, when I was at Brown, I was, you know, working in a hospital, but I did a lot of work with the Department of Health. And, you know, I think you could really make a lot of difference, you know, in terms of, you know, helping with, you know, instituting programs and different policies. And, you know, most of the people that I worked with and even the work I did, you know, we were out in the community talking to people. So it wasn't like I was just, you know, you would just sit in the, you know, an office somewhere. I mean, you could be like a stats or epidemiologist who does a lot of data analysis, but, you know, most of them are working, you know, with the people in the community or working with professionals. So there's a lot of interpersonal work, and I think, you know, the work really does make a big difference. It is an area that there's going to be a big shortage of workers in public health, but and I think, you know, the background in exercise physiology, and of course, you know, you have the PTA, you know, I think those are, you know, those add a lot to you know, what you can bring to the table as a practitioner in terms of your knowledge and experience. So I think it's a great option. I think I would, you know, I definitely would have considered that pretty seriously.
Thank you. That was
You're
helpful.
welcome. Good luck. I know it's like the jobs change, and it's you know, sometimes you also, you know, you can outgrow your job, and some places have more opportunities for you to grow within your job and expand, and others, you know, you're sort of stuck in a box, and then you're, you know, if you have aspirations or like to be challenged, you know, they can often not provide that kind of challenge that
Thank you.
You're welcome. Good luck.